Hello there. We're going to cross the little pond, and we're going to go to one of my favorite countries to cross that little pond, France. Oh, yeah, I love Paris. And that's where we're going. And we're going to visit Le Haut Club de France. Now, this started like in 1928 with a group of students from Lycée Collot. I hope I pronounced that correct. It's one of the most prestigious private schools in all of France. And some of the most outstanding scientists and artists and politicians have come from this school. There were 5 students who just got together to listen to jazz. And they had such a passion for it that they decided that they needed to find a way to make this music more popular among all of the people in France. And by 1931, Le Haut Club de France was born. Now, it was not really a club, it is a building. They had a house band, and that house band contained the greatest of the European musicians. Django Reinhardt and Stéphane Grappelli played in their house band. But they didn't have a club. Yeah, they simply sponsored concerts and moved them from venue to venue to venue around Paris. That way, they're spreading this music around the various neighborhoods and communities that make up greater metropolitan Paris. It's ingenious. As a matter of fact, they didn't really own a brick and mortar building until 1959. But between 1931 and 1959, they hosted every major jazz artist that they could. And they had a very strict policy. It had to be jazz, real jazz. They didn't fool around with jazz offshoots or almost jazz or pop music. It had to be jazz. They also had listening parties where they would find rare recordings and just have listening parties and invite people in. They had their own newsletter where they would publicize events and articles about the music and musicians, etc. They did establish alliances between Europe and America. And great jazz musicians from the very beginning, people like Louis Armstrong, all the way to the modern days, people like Stanley Jordan and Stanley Tarantine and people of that caliber. But all real jazz musicians and only the best. And of course, they also entertained the European jazz musicians as European jazz started to grow and flourish all over the European continent. They even sponsored recordings of various European jazz groups or jazz groups with, say, a European rhythm section and an American artist out front, like a Dexter Gordon or a Coleman Hawkins. Oh yeah, they were serious about promoting this music. They fell in love with it. There was a split at one point in that bebop became a point of contention. As it was in this country for a while. There were those members who thought bebop was a natural offshoot of the development of jazz, and there was 1 or 2 members who felt very strongly that bebop was not jazz at all, and that they needed to maintain a strict adherence to traditional jazz. That little war became known as the New Jazz War, and it did continue for years, but eventually just like in the States, people had to accept the fact that bebop is real jazz and this music does evolve, so open your ears and get used to it. And they did. And so they started hosting concerts, not just with traditional jazz artists, but with bebop and more modern artists as well. This group is the reason that you have such a flourishing of jazz in Europe. It started in 1928 with a group of 5 students in Paris. And I have been to Europe during the summer and been to several jazz festivals in Italy, in France, in Belgium, Holland, in England, all over, in Spain, all over Europe. We now have major jazz festivals. When I was touring a part of a large concert aggregation where we had an orchestra and a concert band and a choir and my little jazz band, the most popular ensemble all over Europe was that little jazz band. We owe appreciation to those 5 students who started this movement when they were still high school students in 1928 and then becoming overt in 1931. The Hot Club of France is chiefly responsible for all the live jazz you find all over Europe today. Please remember this name and the fact that this is something that came from kids and they continued their passion right up until the day they died. Thank you.